This is the World Organic News for the week ending 16th of April 2018. John Moore reporting. As we've discussed, we have a new vision for the podcast and blog, which is decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. We're looking to run interview episodes once a month from about May or June, so if you know anyone who's doing either part of the vision, I'd love to hear from them, or indeed from you if you're on the front line doing the work. Okay, to this week. I begin this week with a post from the blog Coyote Gulch, how energy storage is starting to rewire the electricity industry. Energy storage is the key to unlocking the carbon-free efficiencies of alternative and soon-to-be just energy sources. It is an area of growing expertise, driven of course most visibly by Elon Musk. The Tesla car founder is setting up so-called gigafactories to mass-produce rechargeable AA batteries. Once the economies of scale kick in, this should be relatively inexpensive, but there's a way to go yet. From the article, quote, after annual average growth of about 50% for 5 years, the US electricity industry installed a total of 1 gigawatt hours of new storage capacity between 2013 and 2017, according to the firm GTM Research. That's enough to power 16 million laptops for several hours. While this amount of storage is less than 0.2% of the average amount of electricity the US consumes, analysts predict that installations will double between 2017 and 2018 and then keep expanding rapidly in the US and around the world. End quote. As you may remember, the Musk organisation set up a mega battery in South Australia to cover for grid outages, and it has proven to be beneficial in other ways, balancing the demand on the system, helping to keep the South Australian grid stable, those sorts of things. Now, the grids we have in the developed world are all like someone riding a bicycle in erratic cyclonic winds. To keep the bike upright takes a tremendous effort, as the post explains. Quote, without the means to store electricity, utilities have to produce just enough to meet demand around the clock, including peak hours. That makes electricity different from most industries. Just imagine what would happen if automakers had to do this. The moment you bought a car, a worker would have to drive it out of the factory gate. Assembly lines would constantly speed up and slow down based on consumer whims. It sounds maddening and ridiculous. But electric grid operators basically pull this off, balancing supply and demand every few seconds by turning power plants on and off. That's why a storage boom would make a big difference. Storage creates the equivalent of a warehouse to stow electricity when it is plentiful from other times when it is needed, end quote. Now, there is an issue with this sort of thinking. It assumes every country will be connected to a huge internal grid with interconnectors to other countries. The cost of the grid was subsidised as it was rolled out across the developed world, but once established, these subsidies have been redirected. I looked into having the power connected to a rural property I was considering purchasing back in the early 90s. The minimum cost would have been $25,000, plus poles, plus wires. Even back in the 1990s, I could have purchased a pretty good solar PV wind setup with deep cycle car batteries as storage for a fraction of the cost. It is worth noting that many developing nations do not have the money for the grid nor the capacity to roll one out. However, decentralised, local, village-based microgrids look like a far better starting point. There is no need for the long interconnections between power station and consumer. As the microgrids grow, they can be interconnected to provide more stability and strength. Growing these systems could be done at strategic places around a nation, and the spaces in between filled in time. This would create opportunities for many people much sooner than waiting for the pylons and wires to reach remote villages. The potential is enormous, especially when combined with storage. The benefits of doing this are pretty substantial too. Increased health outcomes from removing oil-burning lamps from houses, internet connectivity and all the economic benefits that flow from that, as well as refrigeration and other devices that run on electricity. If we toss into the mix the falling costs of both wind and PV cells, as well as the shrinking costs of battery storage, the future looks very bright indeed. Now to today's second article. This comes from Our Backyard Garden at the Bridge. It's entitled How Sheet Mulching Works, and this post nails it. Quote, The reason that the earth feeds us is because the microorganisms that live in the soil feed the plants that we eat. These little guys are living beings, and their habitat, much like the habitats of larger plants and animals, can be ruined and made uninhabitable. This happens when the soil is left uncovered. Many of these soil dwellers are killed by the UV rays of the sun, or it is filled with chemicals from industrial fertilizers or herbicides, or it is dug up or tilled by heavy equipment that breaks up the soil or crushes it down. And when the soil is depleted of these important microscopic beings, the plants that live in and on the soil become undernourished and diseased." End quote. This is one of the best summaries of the importance of soil health I've ever come across. All the things agriculture has been suggesting and doing are designed by accident to destroy soil health. Please do not dig nor leave bare soil. And I think it's pretty much taken as read that we don't use chemical fertilizers, herbicides or pesticides. The post goes on to discuss how they sheet mulch, or as it is sometimes called, build a lasagna garden. Quote, "The weeds are covered with cardboard carefully overlapping so that there's no space for the weeds to come through. This kills the plants but leaves the roots and fungi network in place. Make sure that you take any plastic tape off the cardboard. The cardboard is first soaked so that it is wet top to bottom. If you want to use sheet mulching to start a new planting bed, then put a layer of organic compost down next and water it. We only wanted to kill the weeds and encourage fungal growth under our paths, so we skipped this step. And finally, finish off with a layer of mulch. Chopped up leaves or wood chips work well, laid on top." End quote. This is nothing more or less than biomimicry. This is how soil is formed in forests. Layer upon layer of organic matter on top of the soil, which decomposes down to become the soil itself. Then more organic matter on top, especially in deciduous forests, where they have one big organic dump every year. In grasslands, similar things occur at a slower rate, with the added advantage of herbivore droppings. To mimic this in our gardens is to build soil, to protect what is there, and grow the soil biota. As quoted above, the soil biota grows the plants we and our animals eat. It is so obviously a good thing to be doing, yet breaking the shovel in the soil and plough through the field mentality is a difficult mindset to overcome. So spread the word, spread the mulch. Lead by example and grow your food the easy no-dig way. By a happy coincidence, I also have a no-dig gardening ebook available on the website. That's www.worldorganicnews.com. Link in the show notes. And with that, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. As a podcast listener, you may be thinking of producing your own podcast, but you're not sure where to begin. Drop over to mrjohnmoore.com, link in the show notes, and check out my course. There's an introductory offer of a few checklists to get you started. I have been teaching this at community colleges around town and have developed an online version. There's a link in the show notes. Classes start whenever you're ready, and I'd love to help you into this way of communicating. Also, there's a transcript of this episode available at worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.